history. Macron said, quote, "The Republic will not erase any name from its history. It will forget none of its artworks, and it will not take down statues." And a U.S. Marine has been found guilty of espionage by a Russian court. Paul Whelan was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Whelan pleaded not guilty and has maintained throughout the trial that he was framed by an agent from Russia's Federal Security Service. Those are some stories we're following for you right now. Of course, for breaking news, you can go to newsmax.com. Meantime, here's this. Defunding the police has become a rallying cry for some social justice advocates in the wake of the George Floyd protest. But our next guest is speaking out against that idea. In a new opinion piece, he writes, "Want more crime and innocent people killed? Then defund the police." Joining us to discuss, Cory Mills, a U.S. Army veteran and NEWSMAX writer. Cory, it's good to see you today. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. An interesting piece that you write, of course, saying that people could be more at risk when you decide to defund the police. And quite frankly, even top Democrats won't go as far as to say defund the police either.
Well, it's interesting. They keep saying and utilizing the word defund, but then when they're called out on what that actually means, there's 3 and 4 different explanations on what defunding the police looks like. My article is simple. It's whether you look at it from a racial divide or an economic divide, what would end up essentially happening if you eliminated 911 and created 311 is that you wouldn't have that response for, if someone's being raped, someone's being murdered, your house is getting broken into. Which social, community is going to basically answer that call? And the reality is that you're going to have a lot of the affluent neighborhoods. I mean, you already have many gated communities which have their own security and outposts. And these are men who have a G and K license who are licensed to carry. And you'd essentially have privatization of, police services if that was to be the case. So it really would only wealthy who can afford these privatized systems.
Right. You wonder about who would really suffer the most if you were to take police out of a community as well. I want to talk to you about what's happening in Seattle, because I think it kind of gives us an idea as to what that actually might look like. And, quite frankly, a lot of people looking in aren't so happy to see it all play out. Of course, the mayor would say that it's just people having a block party, though.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a joke. And again, it's political rhetoric where they're trying to state that it's just a block party and this is something they do on occasion. But you also heard Seattle's police chief, who also said that there are assaults going on. There's rapes. There's things that are going that they can't get to investigate or to follow out any further. So, as far as for the, utopia as they try to claim that Chaz or CHOP is, I'm not so sure that they're really seeing what they're, really predicting, because it's almost like a Marxist society, if anything.
Yeah. We do know, however, that on Capitol Hill, our politicians do want to find some sort of solution, some sort of police reform that would be in place. What would you like to see them come up with? What do you think is necessary to reform the police in some way without defunding?
Law enforcement to start looking at more stringent utilization of how key tactics are or are not used. I think that we need to have more community outreach programs. We certainly need to look at mental health and funding that in an appropriate manner to ensure that that's getting out and that there's certain types of outreach. The police force have been doing, their jobs for hundreds of years. And the reality is that I don't know that necessarily it's a strict reform on the entire process. Speaking of law, the legislators, things like this, people need to realize that law enforcement is a community, state, and county-wide basis. It's not a federal measure. Getting involved in this is already absurd enough. But the reality is, if I was going to say anything with regards to reform, I think there needs to be more funding of community outreach, and there has to be more outreach into the urban populace. And I think there has to be a restriction on certain types of tactics that are being utilized, which isn't something new. They got rid of the fleeing felon law years ago. So, the reality is that there's been continuation of reform, and, that's the whole idea, is to create a more perfect union and more, a better law enforcement to protect the people.
Yeah. All right. That's Cory Mills. We appreciate you coming on the show. He's a U.S. Army veteran and a NEWSMAX writer as well. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Emma.
Sure. Still ahead.